One of the big questions that I often get from parents and from therapists, and this is a Facebook Live for both audiences, is how do you get a kid to taste food, especially if he really doesn't even know how to chew yet? So that's what we're going to be talking about. And always keep in mind, especially for the parents out there, that I want to always defer to your child's personal feeding therapist, because they know your child best and they know you best. And every single kid in feeding therapy is totally different than the other child. So I'm going to turn off my stove for a minute. I want to get some water boiling because we're going to do a demo in a minute. And let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what I typically run into when I go over to a family's home for feeding therapy, or I'm just working with a typical picky eater. And one of the first questions I ask is, tell me what your child eats now. And a lot of times the families will say to me, oh, he loves crackers. Goldfish crackers, Ritz crackers, any sort of cracker. He can chew those really well. Or they'll say he loves cookies. I even got a kiddo right now who eats nothing but chocolate chips. Lots of teeth, loves chocolate chips. But you know what? That kid can't actually chew. The issue with these foods right here are that they're meltable. You don't really need teeth, to be honest with you, to chew them up. So oftentimes kids will start with a cracker or even, a chocolate chip, and they might take a first crunch, but they're really just smushing with their tongue and moving their jaw about and letting the saliva mix with it, and then swallowing it down, or grabbing their drink and washing it down. Well, first of all, that's actually the first step to learning to eat, and that's okay, unless you're 3, 4, 9, 10, 15 years old. And I've definitely had kids that old who really are just squishing and swallowing food. So before we start working on taking a taste by chomping down on a raw cracker and being able to chew adequately and safely and swallow, we've got to help children learn to eat a variety of foods that are squishable. So one of the ways to do that is by taking a food like, say, a cooked pea, and starting with that if they're willing to do something like this. You know, it's squishable between your fingers, and most importantly, it's squishable between your teeth. And I like kids to start by putting that squishable food on their dinosaur teeth, which is kind of your eye teeth or your first molar here, where when you smile, you can put it right over here. And the first step is being able to hold the food on the eye teeth or on that first molar. Now, whenever you're going to do feeding therapy, or moms and dads, whenever you're going to practice with your kids at home, very first step, because we're going to be putting our fingers in our mouth and we're going to be touching food with our hands, is washing our hands. And especially right now, flu season is rampant all over the United States. And I think a lot of families are surprised to know that the CDC recommends that kids and adults wash their hands to the tune of Happy Birthday twice. You got to sing that song twice to really get rid of all the germs. So before you sit down and work with your kids, or they come into the kitchen, make sure they're washing their hands first, because we're going to be putting fingers in our mouth. Let's talk a little bit more about that. If your kid's not ready for a pea, which a lot of kids aren't, then you might pick something that is a little bit sweeter, a little bit softer to chew, maybe a cube of cheese, or something that's familiar to them. For example, if you've got a kid who is already eating cookies, then I think you've probably seen me mention these before. These are called Farm and Oven Bakery Bites. Farm and Oven Bakery Bites. And I love these for feeding therapy because they contain tons of vegetables. I've taken one of their little bakery bites and I've cut it into kind of a pea-sized cube. Let me show you. About the size of that pea, but look at this. Now it's in the shape of a cube, and when kids have a cube in their mouth, they can feel it much better, they can comfortably hold it, and they can use their fingers to take it out. So the first step to tasting and building on to chewing is holding the cube in your mouth. A lot of times kids will go ahead and bite down, but then they'll want to get rid of the food. I don't like kids to spit out food. I want kids to remove the food in a napkin. We talked about that in an earlier Facebook Live, and you can find that on my YouTube channel. Or remove it with their fingers. I want kids to be very, very comfortable putting their fingers in their mouth and adjusting food. So if we should start over here, and it should fall onto the center of their tongue, let's say that this is their tongue. I want them to be able to take their finger and move it back over onto that molar or their dinosaur teeth. So get kids used to manipulating food with their fingers. I know it doesn't seem very polite at first, but it builds confidence, and after a while, the kids won't need their fingers. Let's talk about another way to help kids learn to taste, and that's via licking. I want to share with you that I know in a lot of courses it's very popular to have kids kiss food. This is just me, but I personally never have kids kiss food. I used to. The reason why I don't is when you go to kiss a carrot, your mouth is closed. I don't want kids' mouths to be closed. I want their mouths to be open. I get kids on my caseload all the time who come to me only kissing food, and they can't get past that step. Well, what they really can't get past is getting their mouth open. And the trick is to go right to licking food. So let me show you a couple tips for that. When you're working on something like a carrot and you want to work on licking food, here's your tongue. Encourage kids to, sure, take a lick, and they'll use the very tip of their tongue, but encourage them to put it over on the side of their tongue as well. When kids feel food on the side of their tongue, they will naturally move toward the stimulation. Below the age of 2, that's still a reflex that kids have, but after the age of 2, that is a learned behavior. Much like the way you and I keep gum over on our molars with our tongue. We want kids to use that skill. So when they move over, then they learn to control the food as they're licking. Now, have them take the food out, go back in on the other side of their tongue, and lick on the side. They can move the carrot itself if they want, but their tongue will start to move toward the carrot. Then here's a trick. Rather than having them come straight on and take a lick where they're likely to gag, have them drive the carrot from one side to the other. You can do it for them if you want, but if you are going to do it for them, make sure you're using really firm pressure. So press, drive over, and then press again. So it looks like this. Press, and press again. You're driving over, just like a little motor car, over the top of the tongue. And because the kids are anticipating it going to the other side, it often is not as tickly and you won't get as many gags. So just a little trick for you. And if you find that working, drive back the other way, because we want to work on both sides of the brain when we're doing these types of exercises. Alrighty, so licking. Another thing to consider when it comes to licking food is that perhaps something like a smooth carrot that's cold and right out of the fridge isn't the best for some kids. Think about the temperature, think about the texture. Right here, I've got a plate of crinkle carrots. And these are just ones I ran through my food processor, and then I roasted them a little bit. You don't have to. You can keep them raw if you wanted. But I like to add a little bit of salt whenever I'm working with kids, because the salt often will help them feel the food a little bit better, but it'll also deaden some of their taste buds. And for some kids, they need that in order to go to the next step. So you have to kind of play around with it and see what works for that kid. Now, with these crinkle cut carrots, you can do the same thing we talked about, on the side, over, on the side, and that little bit of crinkle gives a little bit more texture that some kids can really benefit from. I want to show you a little trick to help those kids who are ready and capable of chewing and swallowing but are really hesitant to do so. So maybe they're already doing something like, gosh, chewing and swallowing a piece of licorice. You know, that's pretty chewy. Or a gummy bear, because they love sweet things. And you want to get to carrots. At the top of this Facebook page, you're going to see a video that I just created that's all about how to get a kid to crunch several times on a carrot. And it has to do with bone conduction. One of my favorite tricks with kids is to start with a raw carrot, and if they're already biting on it, and they can hear the crunch, and maybe they're used to just taking it out and placing it on their plate, that's okay. Remember, they're not spitting. Then, if we want to work up to crunching some more, first of all, I'll show the kids that when they crunch, they can hear it. That's because the sound waves go through the air to their ear. But why is it that when you crunch, true, with your mouth closed, you can still hear the crunch? Well, have the kids take a bite, plug their ears, and crunch with their mouth closed. They'll be able to hear it almost louder in a way. It's in their head. What happened was the sound traveled through the jawbone and the bones in your face to the inner ear. That's called bone conduction. And that's another way that we can hear sounds. Well, this is a favorite science experiment at the dinner table and when I'm in feeding therapy, and we'll try this a lot with different foods. If we crunch on it and we plug our ears, can you still hear the sound? Especially if other people around you can't hear it. Why can you hear it? Sometimes bringing a little bit of kitchen science to the dinner table really helps kids get interested in new foods. You're going to find lots of tips like that and lots of research in my new book, Adventures in Veggieland. And for those of you who pre-ordered it, watch for your books to arrive probably this week. All righty. I'm going to kind of shout to my friend in the background here to let me know if there are any questions, but otherwise I want to show you another little trick. I've got a pot of boiling water on my stove. You know, not very much, maybe about an inch. And what we're going to do is we are going to blanch these carrots, and I'll explain to you why. A lot of my picky eaters have a hard time with carrots, rice, chicken, and you know why? It's because when they chew, especially if they have a mild tongue thrust, the food will fall off their molars and into this lateral sulci, you know, this little canyon on the other side of our teeth. And when that happens, the kids, they don't know what to do about it, and they often will start spitting out food. Have you ever thought about when you bite into a carrot, you get a lot of shards of carrots in your mouth? Well, if you want kids to be able to chew on a carrot and still get a crunch, what you want to do is take your baby carrots and pick out some that are about the same size. Let me pick, I don't know, they're all about the same size. Throw them in your boiling water and let them boil for about 2 minutes. It kind of depends on the thickness of the carrot. But you want to create a carrot that has just enough give when you put a fork in it. Not a steamed carrot, not that kind of feeling. Still is going to be very firm. Once you have that going, then what you want to do is take your carrots out and just scoop them out right here and throw them right into an ice bath. Now, the ice bath will stop the cooking right away. Give them a second, and then when you pull them out, what happened was the carrot soaked up all that extra moisture when you were cooking it. And now it'll still crunch, but it'll be moister, and the kids won't get those little bit of shards down in this lateral sulci that we talked about. You can do this with almost any vegetable. You can do it with broccoli, and it'll really brighten up the broccoli and make it a lot prettier, a lot greener. You can do it with cauliflower, sugar snap peas, but my favorite is carrots. And then if you feel like this is still too much for your kiddo to bite into, go ahead and just cut it, maybe in half, and make it a little bit skinnier. This flat edge right here makes it a lot easier for kids to bite off. All right. Those are my tips for helping with tasting. I want you to be sure to go to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. I've been posting about 2 videos there to help you per week. And if you subscribe to my YouTube channel, then you'll get a notice every time we have a new one. Make sure you look at my playlist on helping kids learn to chew and also helping kids who are hesitant eaters. Hey, my friend in the back, do we have any questions? I can't quite see them on my screen here, and I want to make sure. We've got one question coming up. Got my helper reading in the background. Facebook Lives can be so tricky because the questions go by so fast in front of me, I can't always read them. Oh, I got a list of questions. All right. Do the Farm and Oven bakery bites taste good? They do. They come in all different flavors. And if you go to their website, I'll put the link in the comments here shortly for you. You can get a sample pack or you can order any of your favorite flavors. This particular one is the carrot cinnamon. The one I love the best is the lemon. And they also have a chocolate beet that's really yummy. What I like best about them, though, is they have the consistency of a really soft Tootsie Roll. So you can imagine how perfect it is for kids who are first learning to chew, and they melt away fairly quickly. Another question I have, oh, hi, it's the Mess Hall from New Zealand. Hey, guess what? I'm going to be speaking in Australia in February of 2019, a year from now. So I'm hoping that maybe zip over to New Zealand as well. I hope I get to meet you in person. Thanks for following. And Jennifer asks, do you have any suggestions for how to deal with a formula feed since birth 8-month-old on bottle strike? We can talk about that for a second. One of the things you want to consider about a child who goes on a bottle strike about 6 to 8 months of age is that they may actually have difficulty with their suck, swallow, breathe coordination. And the reason why is you want to ask yourself, and this, Jennifer, this may not be the situation for you, but I always want to bring it up because it's so common, that kids who often start to reject their bottle at that age, either A, they're teething, or they've been doing a lot of dream feeding, where they're half asleep while they're taking the bottle. And the problem with that is that when babies do a lot of dream feeding, a little bit's fine, but a lot of dream feeding, they're asleep for the lesson. You see, kids learn to suck from the breast and the bottle because they have a reflex to do so. And we learn from that reflexive movement. So if you're asleep for the lesson and the reflex begins to integrate right around 5 or 6 months of age, you no longer know what to do because you were relying on the reflex. So you might ask yourself that about that particular kiddo. I've got another one here. I like washing the hands as an initial sensory activity. Absolutely, absolutely. Especially for my kids with autism, I like those kids to understand that our kitchen fun together is based on a routine. And any of my kids that have sensory challenges or attention issues or perhaps autism, they really benefit from knowing exactly what the plan is. What's the first step? It's washing our hands. What's the second step? It's putting on our apron. What's the third step? Et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of these kids need a picture schedule. But for parents at home who perhaps are just working with a typical picky eater, know that the more often that you bring kids into the kitchen and you establish the same routine, the more likely they are to participate and benefit from it. It's no different than if you were running a preschool. Those kids know the routine from the moment they walk in the classroom. And we need that for them at home. It's very comforting and they feel very safe. I'm going to see if there are any more questions, and then we'll probably wind up. But again, I want to just mention to you to be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. So important. And if you're not on my newsletter, I've got a new one going out next week. And then finally, if you haven't already ordered my new book, Adventures in Veggieland, I hope you will. When I checked right before this, it was still 39% off pre-order pricing on Amazon. When I swung into Barnes & Noble earlier this week, they told me it'll be on the shelves probably by this weekend. You want to look in the cookbook section. And I see one more question. What would you suggest for a 2-year-old with ASD that eats purees and will lick her food only? A 2-year-old who eats purees and will lick her food only. Okay, let's walk through that for a minute. And take me with a grain of salt. It really helps if I can see the kid. But besides the fact she's probably adorable, because what 2-year-old isn't, when you've got a kiddo, especially with autism, and they are all about sameness, they're all about patterns, then you want to create a pattern to help them learn to chew. And the first step with a 2-year-old to teach them how to chew is either to teach them to pick up, let's just say it's a carrot, to pick up a food and place it on their molar, take it out and put it back, or place it on their molar and let you take it out. So the first step is being able to hold it on the molar. The next step is being able to hold it and chew one time. And typically with a 2-year-old, depending on the severity of the autism complications, then I will typically do a lot of fun games to help them know what I'm looking for them to do. I definitely model it as well, but a lot of my children with autism don't do as well with modeling. Not to say it's not a good thing, just to say what I also do is, for example, if I were going to use the Farm and Oven bakery bites, then I would put it on the child's molar, and I'd probably reward with a silly song or maybe a favorite toy, something that's very interactive. You got to be more fun than the toy. And then do it again and just do lots of repetitive practice over time. Don't stay with one step too long, because then it's hard to move on. And that's sometimes why kids get stuck with licking food or kissing food, as I said earlier, because we stayed there for too long. So gently, gently push to the next step. Remember, holding is first, biting down once is another. I'd probably use a meltable for that. And then we start to work on several chews in a row, even if the kid has to take it out of their mouth afterwards. So I hope that helps. Another idea for you is if you ever want to do a one-on-one consultation and talk about a specific child, you can always sign up for mealtime coaching. Look on my homepage at coaching, and I usually do those on Monday afternoons. Alrighty, I'm not seeing any more questions. Anything else? Let me double check one more time. I love it when I get handed questions all typed up. Oh, hi, Molly. Molly says, I have a 14-year-old picky eater with autism who won't eat any vegetables. I'm a second feeding therapist. His first was a psychologist. Oh, that sounds like was a little bit forceful. He has no intrinsic motivation to eat vegetables, but will happily taste them for me in therapy. What suggestions do you have to help promote more motivation to eat them at home? Okay, again, I'm assuming that this 14-year-old has the cognitive ability to have some conversation with you and find out what his motivation is. Whether it's a child with autism or whether it's a typical 14-year-old boy, they're tricky because you've got to find out what their motivation is and what will help them make this a habit. So I'll often talk to the parents about helping the child earn a reward, or I'll possibly, if they're not reward focused, I'll also talk to the parents about possibly letting the child earn back something that they're used to having all the time. So, for example, I did have a child about that age with autism who really loved his iPad more than anything. And we worked on limiting that iPad, and then he got extra time on the iPad for doing his food homework. Because the key to food homework is that the more the children take bites of food, even if it's homework-based, the more they learn to like food. So Molly, one thing is, if you look on my YouTube channel and you'll see the video about my 3 E's chart, expose, explore, expand. It's the 3 E's that my new book is based on. use that chart to help rotate through food homework at home. There's a 45-minute video on my YouTube channel that shows you how to use it, and you can download the chart as many times as you want and start working on getting more repetitions with this kid, and either he earns a reward or he earns some extra time on his iPad or whatever it happens to be. Find his motivation, and what you're going to accomplish by that is eventually he'll have enough taste of the food that he's very comfortable eating it. Now, we all have foods that we don't like, but we know we've got to eat them, right? And I mean, for me, it's peas. I'm not a big fan of peas, but I'll eat them. I know they're good for me. I may not always order them, but if they're presented when I'm at a dinner party or over in feeding therapy, I'll eat the peas. We all have foods like that, and it's a part of life to learn to eat it. So I'm really impressed that you would take the time to look into this and figure out some solutions for that kiddo. Christina says, how do I find your YouTube channel? Christina, go to my homepage, which is melaniepotock.com or mymunchbug.com. They're the same website. And you'll see up in the right-hand corner all my social media icons. The farthest one on the right, the little red icon, is YouTube. And that will take you to the correct one. You should see about 505 subscribers there right now, so you'll know you're at the right one. And you just hit subscribe. If you're having any trouble, just email me via my contact page and I'll send you the link. All right, everybody. I'm not seeing any more questions, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much for tuning in to Coach Mel on Mondays. That's me. And happy eating.